Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy CJ Vogel, and the estimable Jerry Hamilton as well. Guys, today we're going to be breaking down the wide receiver position on our pre-spring position previews, doing a little deep dive on that group now as we I think we have, for the most part, all right, the roster construction for the 2026 team mostly done. No, there still could be some add-ons, but especially at the wide receiver position. So we'll talk about that here on this edition of On Texas Football. But first, let me give a shout out to our friends over at South Point Dodge for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. We'll give you a special message from our friends at South Point Dodge as well later on in the broadcast. All right, let's start, guys, with the biggest addition probably in the transfer portal for Texas overall is at the wide receiver position. Cam Coleman from Auburn. Cam Coleman has been, by a lot of draft analysts and prognosticators, projected to be a first-round pick, and he is no doubt going to be the number one guy in this wide receiver room. Starting with you, Jerry, your thoughts on Cam Coleman, what he brings to this wide receiver room, and along with the expectations now with him being Arch Manning's number one weapon.
Yeah, first, congrats to Cam Coleman for having a quarterback that can get him the ball finally. I mean, he's put up big numbers at Auburn, and if you watch his highlights from last year, he was waiting on every deep ball from Jackson Arnold. Like, he's going to have a new experience, and he's going to be very excited the first time he runs routes with Arch whenever Arch comes back off his minor injury there. But look, what Texas is getting is a guy that commands safety attention over the top. He is a 50-50 ball winner that turns into 80-20s against SEC competition. He is a guy that is physical. He can go get the football. He can beat press coverage down the field. He has legitimate big play ability, like game-changing, momentum-grabbing ability. But I think the biggest thing he brings, along with his ability, is Rod and CJ, what it's actually going to do for the rest of the receivers, for the tight end position, and the Texas offense, because there is no doubt that anybody who game plans for Texas with Cam Coleman, they have to help over the top with safety, because that can turn into 7, especially now that he's got a quarterback that can hit him in stride.
No doubt. CJ, what are your thoughts about it? He's going to open up so many different areas of the offense because of the gravity that a guy like that has. But Cam Coleman, in your opinion, what's going to be his impact on this offense?
Yeah, not only does he help the other wide receivers, not only is he going to help Arch Manning, but he's going to help the running game as well, because you have to be aware of the deep threat. Any single play, regardless of where you are on the field, could be a threat for 7, and that's huge for Texas, right? And I think he is a ball tracking guru, if you will. That ball gets up in the air in his hands, his body control, spectacular. Some numbers to back that up. According to PFF, a couple numbers here. He had 11 opportunities to make a contested catch in 2025. He made 9 of those. That is tough to do over 20 yards down the field. Jared, to your point about the 50-50 turning into 80-20, that's exactly what those numbers would indicate. He's also the 3rd highest wide receiver grade in all of the SEC for any wide receiver that recorded a snap. The 3rd highest grade, according to PFF, on targets 20 yards or more down the field. That's at a 97.9. Tells you exactly what he's able to do and where the strength of his game is. That's something that when you combine what the rest of the roster looks like, the underneath is going to have a lot of green grass to run to.
Yeah, and to add to the point that CJ just made there about how good he is on the deep contested targets, he has the best catch rate of any wide receiver in the country with double-digit deep contested targets. And for a guy who excels in the scramble drill like Arch Manning does, averaging over 11 yards per attempt versus Power 4 teams on scramble drill throws, now he's got another guy that if he's one-on-one, like you guys say, Arch can just loft it out there and give his guy shots, and Cam Coleman can make magic happen. And he does time and time again. And to your point, he's had 5 different quarterbacks I think he's had to deal with there at Auburn. And pretty inept offense, one of the worst offensive lines in all of college football last season. He's going to get upgraded everywhere. Not only the city he lives and all this kind of stuff, but the weapons and players obviously around him on that offense. So I think Cam Coleman is going to shine and start something. Now, one more thing before we move on to the rest of this group. There are elements of his game that have been untapped pretty much because of the inefficiency and ineptitude of the Auburn offense. His yak yards, just give it to you real quick. He's a guy that had 2.6 yards after the catch per reception 245 yak yards. That's it. To give you a little perspective on that, I mean, Ryan Wingo, in his 2 years, 717 yak yards, 8.6 yards at the catch per reception. I mean, Sark lives off of yak daddies, if you will. And we have not seen that from Cam Coleman. Also, he lines up outside most of the time. He's out wide. 6% of the time he's in the slot. That's it. So 94% of the time he's out wide. Sark has a lot more fluidity with the way he utilizes his wide receivers and moves those guys around. So he'll scheme him open a lot more than he was at Auburn as well, and give him some easy matchups to manipulate. So,
Rod, that's a great point. You know what? That's a great point, because this affords an opportunity for Cam Coleman in yards after the catch, because heading into the NFL draft after his junior season, the worst thing you want to be labeled is a run and catch receiver. You know, like, okay, he's a one-trick pony of sorts.
Yep.
This gives him the opportunity, as talented as he is, to redefine who he is as a wide receiver.
Yep. I can't wait to see that. It's going to be fantastic. All right, moving on here. Also, it's going to open up things for Ryan Wingo. I just mentioned Ryan Wingo and how I think late in the season, even Sark, I think, figured out how to weaponize him. Took him a little while, too. They were throwing it deep to Ryan Wingo a lot, putting him in some situations that weren't necessarily, I think, very effective for him. But I think they found out that he's really a yak daddy and does really well with the ball in his hands late. What is the addition of Cam Coleman now going to open up for Ryan Wingo? Jerry, you first.
Yeah, look, I think, to your point, Texas, I think the way they use Ryan Wingo the second half of the season, last part of the season, is where he's at his best. Rod, you've been calling that since high school on what you saw on tape with him. I think what this does, Cam Coleman opens the field up even more for Ryan Wingo, right? And I think that is a great thing. I think it's going to get Ryan Wingo in some even better matchups. Again, more space to play in. So I think it's also going to allow Sark to move him around a little bit more, right, in his third year. Because here's the one thing about that. Ryan Wingo, third year in the system. Emmett Mosley, second year in the system. Cam Coleman, this will be his first year in the system. So Ryan Wingo has the most familiarity with this system. He's going to know the depth, the insides and outs of the system more than any other receiver at Texas. That should afford him the ability in year 3 to be moved around a little bit more and start really, truly maximize him.
CJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I like that explanation a lot. For me, what this does for Ryan Wingo is takes off the pressure of needing to be the deep ball guy, right? And what we found out is, hey, the kid with the ball in his hands is pretty good. Yeah. And towards the back end, there wasn't necessarily that force feeding, if you will, vertically down the field. Again, some numbers here on 22 targets, 20 or more yards downfield. He only brought in six receptions. So 6 of 22 when targeted downfield. That's not great. And at some point, I don't think teams respected the deep shot from Texas as much as probably they should have, even with Emmett Mosley back in the lineup. So that gives Texas 2 options. And so what we're trying to discuss as well, what does that then do to opposing defenses? Who do you shift over to? Who do you get more eyes on if you're a safety or 2 safeties? And if you even throw a third one back there, well, we do believe that Texas, with these running backs, should be able to hurt you in the ground game as well. So that's what it speaks to me is, hey, you're no longer forcing, a square peg in a round hole with Ryan Wingo. You're able to play him more naturally, more of that underneath, and let the legs and the after the catch ability kind of speak for itself.
To add to one thing before we move on, you just brought it up there, CJ. He wasn't necessarily great as a deep threat, but when they did figure out that he's a yak daddy, guys, second in the Power 4 and in the FBS in yards per reception on throws behind the line of scrimmage. Second in yards per route run on throws behind the line of scrimmage.
There's a reason why Sark started 5 straight games what they target to Ryan Wingo behind the line of scrimmage.
He's really good in that capacity. All right, moving on here as well. Emmett Mosley. Now think about it. I love that roles are being defined with this group even before they. Now just like I said, I think it's already been proven that Cam Coleman, you gave the numbers as a deep threat, one of the best in college football. We just gave you numbers. Ryan Wingo, one of the best yak daddies in college football. Emmett Mosley, I feel like he's going to have a clearly defined role in this offense as well now with the new makeup of the wide receiver room. CJ, I'll throw it to you first. What are your thoughts about how Emmett Mosley fits in here?
Yeah, I think he's a perfect slot option for this offense. And I think I say that because, well, the hands were always sure last year. I felt like towards the back end, he was a guy that I had the most faith in when the ball was in the air, that he would come down with it. On top of that, I think he creates separation as well as anybody on this roster that we saw routinely in 2025, right? So the slot speaks to what his skill set provides. And on top of that, he's really good in the intermediate. Going back to it, he had a 95 grade by PFF and throws 10 to 19 yards downfield, bringing in 11 of 17 targets. So that speaks to me for a few things, right? It's that second, it's the out route, the 10-yard out on flood concepts for waggles that we've seen often. That also speaks to another thing. How about some slot fades? To me, Emmett Mosley is a prime candidate for a slot fade. And I think that is a huge strength for what Texas will utilize him as next year as well.
100%. And I'll add to that. I think, look, in traffic, going up and snatching a football, he's physical, he is strong, and he's got really strong hands, right? So I think I agree on the slot fade 100%. I also think he can be a really good safety blanket for Arch Manning, because the one thing that I would bet on with Emmett Mosley is if he has to catch the ball, if the ball's in the air in a traffic situation, he's going to go pluck that thing playing through contact. And I think that's a big part of it. Look, I kind of look back to what Jordan Whittington did in the slot at Texas and say, because I think Emmett Mosley's the best blocking wide receiver you have. He's the most physical wide receiver you have. And there's a real toughness to him. And I think he's got deceptive speed. So, and I really think he's got deceptive speed. I think, and I know this is not a knock on a great player, Jordan Whittington. I think Emmett Mosley can be a better receiver version of Jordan Whittington out of the slot for Texas. And I think what's going to afford him that ability is the two guys we just talked about before.
Yeah, good stuff there, Jerry, about your comment about him, Emmett Mosley's ability to make contested catches. In his career, he's 11 of 22. So he's a 50% guy. If you just toss it up and he is blanketed by a DB, 50% chance he's still gonna find a way to come away with it. So good point there. All right, moving on here. Let's talk about Ryan Niblett, because I don't think we talk enough about him as a wide receiver. But is he the guy that after the circle of trust? All right, and I think there are a couple other guys that can get into this circle of trust. I feel like Ryan Niblett for Sark, he feels like he has earned like a couple of his boutique package, whatever it is. Because one of the problems when Ryan Wingo sees the field, we all figure Ryan Wingo is going to be the feature of that play. Yeah. And it probably is a little bit too predictable toward the end. That, Ryan Wingo's in. All right, they're going to Ryan Wingo. It's going to be something, some extravagant play, but it's going to end up, Ryan Niblett, and end up in Ryan Niblett's hands somehow. But so what are your thoughts about Ryan Niblett and how he contributes to the wide receiving room here? I'll throw it to you, Jerry, first.
Yeah, so look, I think Sark is going to try to work in a package for him. I think it's going to be more difficult this year, though, honestly, with Cam Coleman. We're going to talk about Jermaine Bishop. How good can he be as a young guy coming in? A Dalen McCutcheon in year 2. This is a better, more experienced receiver core in 2026, assuming health for all those guys. I think it's going to be a little more difficult. Now, I think Sark will find his spots for him, but I think Ryan Niblett, his number one far and away role will continue to be as a return man, which I think he'll be feared this year based off last year, which helps him and helps Texas. But I think there's one ball to go around. Malik Brown is better out of the backfield as a pass catcher than Ryan Niblett is in any role, I would say. And Hollywood Smothers caught 37 passes a year ago at NC State. So I think the problem for Niblett's going to be there's one ball to go around. And there's a lot of guys in their last year of college football here before they go off to the NFL. And now that Sark has those running backs to use in the passing game, does that take any of that package, those possibilities away for Niblett?
Yeah, I won't go too long. Look, he only played 36 pass snaps last year. Yeah. Only 36, and that feels low because he had 9 targets. So, a fourth of the time he was on the field where Texas dropped back to pass, they went to him. Now, he didn't receive or haul in a catch on any passes beyond the line of scrimmage as well. So more of that boutique. And I think what Sark does really well is try to align plays, whether it's through a traditional wide receiver or running back screen or one of those infamous throwback screens for Sark. Try to set up that wall for Ryan Niblett, just like a punt return that allows him that same kind of eyesight and vision as what we saw that made him basically an All-American in the return game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Great stuff. Let's talk about Khayqwan Lockett, gentlemen. Did he earn a little bit more playing time with his performance late in the season, especially in late in the season making plays for Arch Manning? Do we think Khayqwan Lockett could be somebody that could penetrate the circle of trust here and end up being someone who contributes in this wide receiver room? Jerry, you first.
I think I'm going to say this, and I like Khayqwan Lockett as a player, but I think patience is the key here. Because Cam Coleman coming in, Ryan Wingo in year 3, I mean, that is 2 really good outside receivers. So that is a tougher group for me for Khayqwan Lockett than last year. Now, the difference is Lockett's a sophomore. I think he's got to just have some patience, continue to have patience, continue to develop. And I think he has a chance to be a really good player for Texas. Where I do think he can benefit this year's favorable matchups, Rod. I mean, I think there's a possibility to get a favorable matchup or 2 for him. And I think as a red zone player, and I mean, look, the one thing I'll say is if Cam Coleman, Khayqwan Lockett, because Lockett is really good when the ball's in the air, great body control. I think he'll be a stronger player. You know, he was a young senior. He was pretty skinny for his frame coming in. He's added 12, 14 pounds. Let's see if he adds another 7, 8 pounds of strength to that frame. I bet he does. So he's going to be able to handle press. He's going to be able to handle playing through contact better next year. So I think one thing that he has a chance to do is so much attention is going to be on Cam Coleman. Could you use him in jump ball situations? Could you use him in 50-50 ball situations with matchups on a more favorable DB at times? Rod, that may be a question you need to answer.
It's a good one. Yeah, no, it's a good one. I think that Cam Coleman's going to attract so much attention. You can do that with 2 or 3 guys. You can just find easy matchups to manipulate. CJ, what are your thoughts about Khayqwan Lockett in this wide receiver room?
Yeah, I think the best thing that you could say about Khayqwan is that he made the most of the opportunity presented to himself, right? And we've seen freshman wide receivers get opportunities and not make plays and kind of fall out of favor with the quarterback and the staff, right? And that's over the last 5 years we've seen that. That wasn't just the 2025 situation. So for Khayqwan to end the year with that big catch against Michigan for the touchdown, hey, he made the most of his opportunity, and that gives you that confidence and trust just a little bit more than what you would have if you're a quarterback saying, oh, I know this guy's on the field. If I make a bad throw, he can bail me out. If I make a wrong read, he can bail me out. For Khayqwan, that's the number one thing that I took away from that game, and I think it's a step in the right direction to ultimately becoming perhaps that 4th guy in the wide receiver room.
I'll give you some props, CJ, because you actually were someone who predicted that Daylon McCutcheon would contribute early as a freshman. You said of that group, you thought he was the wide receiver that would contribute early, and he did. It actually came to fruition. So I'll give you the floor here to talk about Daylon McCutcheon. Now, is he one of those guys? Could he right now possibly already be in Sark's circle of trust, or at least have a firm foot in the circle of trust potentially?
Yeah, firm foot in the door. That's exactly how I'd put it. And I'll say this. I think you're going to see a more relaxed, more free to play Daylon McCutcheon. It felt like at times when he was on the field a year ago is I'm on the field. I know where I need to be. I just can't mess up after that. Right. And that's tough when you're a freshman impacted, when you're not expected to make a lot of impact early on. You get in, you say, am I supposed to be here? For Daylon, I think he is a very stout route runner. And I think that he is a very reliable option. But where do you see the freedom in his wide receiving game like you will see that with the guys that we've mentioned previously? I think that grows in year 2. But I think he's a very solid option if you're Sark and Arch Manning saying if he's on the field, we know what our floor is with him.
Yep. Jerry, what are your thoughts about Daylon McCutcheon? Last year, he did shine early on. There's no doubt about that. And it's hard to earn Sark's trust as a freshman wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I think he came in. He was really well schooled, working with margin hooks. Then at Lovejoy in that program, he was really well schooled. He understood the nuances of the position, and I think he was a quick learner and adapter from everything we heard. I think the biggest thing now for him is continuing to get stronger. I mean, being able to play through the contact, hold on to the ball when he's contacted, and I do think, look, that second year, as CJ said, you have more of a calmness to you at every position, right? That's part of it. I think gaining strength is going to be the key for him, though, is number one thing, because when you see kind of and I'm not even sure struggles any of his freshman year minus situations, I think it had to do with his lack of strength as much as anything.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the freshmen, gentlemen, to round things out here. Let's start with the one getting, I think, the most hype, and well deserved, by the way. So I'm not saying it ain't well deserved, because Jermaine Bishop is an absolute stud. And Brandon Harris, even, he was blushing a little bit when we asked him who's going to contribute earliest out of this freshman class, and he multiple times mentioned Jermaine Bishop. So, Jerry, your thoughts? Could a freshman phenom in Jermaine Bishop be a weapon in this offense with an already stacked wide receiver room?
This is not a knock on McCutcheon, Niblett, and all those guys. They better be glad they've been there. They don't want to come in the same class as this guy. Jermaine Bishop just has big playability. He has make-you-miss ability. He has a little Peter Warrick to him. I don't care if he's 5'11 3/4, 162 when he shows up, whatever it was after he was playing basketball at Willis. He plays bigger. He's fearless. His lack of – it's an Xavier Worthy quality. I'm not saying he's going to be as Xavier Worthy, but he has that quality of, oh, so you think I'm not physical? I'm going to show you I'm physical. Because people say, oh, look at this guy. He's not running through contact. He's not going to play through a hit on his hips or thigh range. Oh, yeah, he will. It showed up on defense and offense. And that's the one thing he has. It showed up on both sides of the ball. There were times on Friday nights he was the most physical player on the field, and he was 165 pounds playing safety. I think this guy, if he picks up the system, this is the biggest thing for a kid like Jermaine Bishop, because he played everywhere in high school, right, Rod? He played until he cramped. Return game, punter, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, safety, corner. Now he has to pick up a system at one position. How quickly does he do that? Because he just played until he got tired. Just go out there and make plays. Well, it's a different game now. You're having to learn a whole offensive system and what all 10 guys around you do on the field. If he picks it up quick, that guy's going to play and may play more than we think, and he'll factor in the return game as well.
Yeah, I think he provides something that you just don't have in the rest of the room with the after-the-catch ability and in that frame, right? He's very suited for having the ball in his hands and making guys miss. Jerry, you mentioned Peter Warrick. I, in my head, said, is Jalen Waddle too much of a comparison there? But doesn't get much better than Peter Warrick. And I think it's that just quickness, that ability to instinctually know when to cut, where to look, what the vision is, trying to create with the ball in his hands. That's what I see when I see Jermaine Bishop. I think he gets on the field, and whether it's in the system that Sark has created already or a system that Sark has created for him specifically, I think he gets on the field and provides for you very early on.
Ron, I want you to comment on this. His worst case scenario, and this is not a bad thing, is he ends up as a corner.
Oh,
what would you think of him at corner if he ended up on that side of the football?
He could be a Nathan Vasher.
That's kind of exactly.
No, I'm serious, because he's when you saw Vasher was like, he was slight, he was a small guy, but he was fearless, and he would lay the hammer, and he was a little bit lean. He was a lean guy, but still he would follow through his hips, like he would throw his whole body basically into hitting guys. And I would see him as a Nathan Vasher, because Vasher was one of the best punt returners in Texas football history. Guy came out of high school. I think he was an athlete, played wide receiver out of high school, played DB, played everything. That's my Texas comparison if Jermaine Bishop decided to play DB. By the way, that's if that's where he ends up, he's still going to end up starting. But
that's three really good comparisons, I'll tell you that.
He is a can't lose. I mean, he is a tremendous prospect. He's one of the rare guys that could play either side of the ball just as effectively. He's just got to have good health, and that guy's going to have a career in football.
All right, let's wrap it up here, guys. The rest of the freshman class here in this wide receiver room. Chris Stewart and Cohen Brown. These two gentlemen also coming in with that freshman class here of wide receivers. What are your thoughts? CJ, I'll throw it to you first. Let's start with Chris Stewart, in your opinion.
Yeah, no, Chris Stewart's a guy that you almost forgot about because he had been committed to Texas for so long. And I think that speaks to Texas saying, hey, we see something early and we see that development enough to say, hey, regardless of who else we're pursuing, we still want you in the class. And Tennessee made a late run. Obviously, his brother ended up signing elsewhere as well. But this is a guy that, again, I think excels with the ball in his hands after the catch. And Again, you saw his game really develop from, all right, my athleticism is going to be what gets me open to, okay, now I'm going to have to become a finesse route runner. And that's something that I think developed long-term in his game as well, and something that I think will certainly get him off to a quick start at Texas. We'll see how much of an impact, if any, early on. Obviously, this is a loaded room, but his route running is something that stood out to me early on when watching his high school tape.
Jerry, your thoughts on the freshman Cohen Brown coming in at the wide receiver position?
Yeah. And I want to say, Chris, one thing about Chris Stewart, you don't have to teach him. He runs through the ball naturally really well, Rod. That guy doesn't – he runs through the football. That's the one thing when I saw him in person the multiple times I did, I always noticed. Cohen Brown, I think CJ and I are both very big Cohen Brown fans. And it's more to do with everything that you don't see on a huddle tape. I think the guy's a worker. I think he is super tough. I think he's a leader. CJ would have similar stories. The day I was at Waxahachie at practice this year, he took every drill at receiver. He took every drill they asked him to at DB. In the return game, did not matter. Last guy to leave the field. That's a consistent thing around that program or college coaches you talk to about him. I'll tell you where he is very sneaky. And he's not going to be sneaky once you see him for the first time, but he's sneaky based on what you would think. He is super strong and super physical. He almost is built like a running back. I mean, this guy, you're talking about a guy's 5'11 and a half, 195, probably closing on 200 pounds on some level. And he's got the pipes like a running back, Rod. I mean, if he walked out there and took a handoff, you'd say, oh, yeah, is that a new freshman running back?
Yeah.
He's built like that. I mean, he's got strong calves, quads, hamstrings. You just look at him and say, are you sure you're wide out? But that dude competes now. He is a competitor.
I'll say this. I know that there's the comparison to Matthew Golden. Jerry, frame-wise, almost tit for tat, right? He's 6'1", 195, 200 pounds, right in that mix. He runs very well. He's a deep ball threat after the catchability. Rod, we talked about it last year with Dalen McCutcheon, how I thought this would be a guy that surprised as a freshman. Obviously, I think Jermaine Bishop is going to be that guy, but I think we're going to hear a ton of positives about Cohen Brown for all the reasons that we just laid out. His work ethic, his desire to be on the field, to learn the playbook, and obviously the physical attributes. This is a guy that's going to play at Texas and is far going to outlast what that ranking was coming out of high school, in my opinion.
Man, great stuff there, guys. All right, that's our breakdown. Before we get out of here, let's thank our friends over at South Point Dodge really quickly. We appreciate them and all their support of On Texas Football. Longhorn fans, a great time for you to head on over to our friends over at South Point Dodge. Whether you need a car, truck, SUV, something new, something used, our friends over at South Point Dodge pride themselves on being Austin's automotive everything. So there's nothing like Texas football and nothing runs like a Ram. South Point Dodge is also Austin's Ram headquarters, and right now it's a great deal for you to get huge savings on Ram trucks, Jeep SUVs, plus exclusive perks for On Texas Football listeners. Right now you get 90 days to make your first payment, and they'll ship that fantastic ride to you no matter where you are in the great state of Texas or beyond. Over 600 vehicles in stock right now, so whether you need a workhorse or a weekend warrior, our friends at South Point Dodge have your back. Visit southpointdodge.com or go see them in person off of I-35 in South Austin. That's southpointdodge.com. We appreciate our friends at South Point Dodge, and you will as well. Thank you, Jerry. Great stuff as always. Thank you, CJ, for contributing to our deep dive breakdown of the wide receiver position. And thanks to you out there for watching and for listening. For Jerry and for Matthew, for also for my and CJ, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.